following announcement has been paid for by the new Howl Order.
Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blues, we'll cover it all here on Commander's Nightly News. I'm your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, for all intents and purposes, Sunday's game feels like the end of an era, potentially. Now, I think this game represents a number of things because I don't think we honestly know how Josh Harris and company feel about Ronald Rivera at this point. I think they're disappointed in the way that the season's gone. I don't know what their expectations were heading into the season. Some of the losses have been really bad, especially the ones at home. The worst performances this season have been at home, and generally when you're at home, that's where the most owners are going to be. You know, that's where you're going to have the vast majority of the ownership group in attendance. And our worst performances this season have all been at home. So it hasn't been a good look for Ronald and company, but the fans have already made up their mind. And we've decided a long time ago after the Bears game that this group was done. I think most people had already decided that last year, like, we got to get Ron the hell out of here. But I think people like myself were willing to give him an opportunity with the new change. You know, well, tons of changes to the staff, but the one that was the most important in particular, offensive coordinator with Eric Bieniemy, thought that was a shrewd move. And if Bieniemy could come in here, show that Sam Howell was a legitimate starting quarterback and get this offense where it needed to be, if the defense could just do what they did last year, or something even slightly worse, but the defense was really good at times last year, we would be fine. But like we did with Carson Wentz, just assuming that things would be the same or just hoping that you could just give me what you gave me the year before, as this defense has proven this year, not the case. So I think this is a big game for Ronald because we know how we feel as fans. We're ready for a wholesale change, top to bottom, clean it all up. I think this game is going to alter how Josh Harris and company move. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, Harris's style is to stay out of things. He's not going to force a trade. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that. And all of that stuff is going to be left up to Ronald and company should they lose this game, drop to 3-5, whether they would trade Montez Sweat or Chase Young or whomever. You know, I disagree with that notion because, again, if I'm Ron, if I'm Ronald and company, I'm trying to save my job. And there's nothing they can do on the personnel side at this point that's going to save their job. The only thing they can do is attack on the field and win. And trading any of your assets right now isn't going to help you do that. So if they're trying to do what's best for the team long term, even if they know they're not going to be a part of it, well, that's great on their part. Excellent. But as far as I'm concerned, Josh Harris has never owned an NFL team. When we could talk about everything he's done and the template that he's used in other sports, but the NFL is a different beast. It's a different animal. It ain't the NHL and it ain't the NBA. And I don't know if he's going to be overly aggressive. If, history repeats itself, he won't be. He won't be, meddlesome, which is what we want. We want him to allow football people to do their jobs. But if we're talking about getting something for a player that you may not be able to get past this opportunity that's coming up with the trade deadline, maybe he might have to step in and force them to do something that they don't want to do. Trust me, they don't want to trade anybody. How many times have you heard Ron say, we got everything we need in this room? Ronald has said that numerous times. Every time they get a big win or a big loss, a crushing loss, we've got everything we need right here. He firmly believes that because this is the roster that he's built. And again, trading away pieces isn't going to help him in trying to turn this season around. Even if they lose this game, in Ronald's mind, we still got 9 games left. They're going to keep singing that song until shit gets bleak and they're out of it. But until then, and truth be told, there's still a lot of football to be played. Fans don't want to hear that shit because they see where this thing is going. But as a player, as a coach, you can't look big picture. You got to focus on the next opponent. Because the next game could be the first game in a 6-game win streak. You don't know that. And what we've known from Ron's tenure is that at some point, you're going to get some sort of win streak. Now, could be too little, too late. And maybe that 2-game winner we had to start the season is the best we're going to get this season. Who knows? That could be it, though. This game on Sunday, I just got this weird feeling about it. That it's either going to be really good for us or really bad for us. It could be one of those games like the Bears game where this shit could get out of control quickly. And you're watching this thing at halftime thinking, everybody's got to go. They've got to fire everybody. It could be one of those games. I kid you not. I've got this weird feeling in my stomach that I generally don't have, because it's not often that I go into a game telling you, I think we can get our asses beat in this game. Like, bad. It's not often that I tell you that. I usually tell you there's only 3 outcomes that can happen. A close win, a close loss, or we lose going away. But rarely is it that I feel like the other team is going to just come in and boat race us, or we have a chance to win by multiple scores. That's how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling like if we catch the Eagles slipping, they turn the ball over. This ain't last year where, we got to find a way to piece together some offense. If they can't get to Sam and he's able to stand back there and deliver, we scored 31 on these chumps last time. We came out and scored on each of our first 2 possessions. We were up 17-7 before the Eagles' final drive of the first half. We were dominating that game. If they come out here tripping, they don't get to Sam, and we're able to get into some kind of offensive rhythm, which is a big if, especially at home. We haven't had a single game yet this season where this team has been in an offensive rhythm outside of Buffalo, but we know what happened in that game anytime we approached the Bills' end zone. Anytime we even got remotely close to the Bills' end zone, something disastrous happened. So it's hard for me to wrap my brain around this team coming out and playing with that sense of urgency that is necessary to beat a team like Philadelphia. But I could see us coming out, and if the Eagles we didn't get a single turnover last game, and we gave up a bunch of explosives, and we'll talk about those things when we get to the game plan. But if we limit some of those things and do the things that we did in the first game, like, the blueprint is there. Now you just got to tighten up on the defensive side of the football. If we can duplicate, replicate, and I know it's tough because the Eagles aren't the same team and neither are we. We were a different team confidence-wise in week 4. We don't have the same level of confidence now that we did then. But we also have more experience than we did in week 4. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. The Eagles are a better defense than they were back in week 4. So things are different now. So you can't assume that we're just going to go in there and do the things that we did the first game against the Eagles a month ago. That shouldn't stop you from trying, though. All in all, I've said this already this week. This feels like a game that, for all intents and purposes, could be the beginning of the end of the Ronald Rivera era here in Washington. You lose this game, and I think shit changes, and it's never going to be the same again. And I think it starts with somebody getting traded. I think that somebody is Montez Sweat. You're not going to re-sign. We know this for a fact. Whether this season goes well or not, you're not re-signing both defensive ends. We knew that coming into the season. We knew that this was a realistic possibility, that if this season didn't go the way that they had hoped by the trade deadline, that one of these guys was going to be moved, if not both of them. The likelihood was we were going to keep one of them. You can't get rid of both of your defensive ends, especially being that you didn't draft one high in the draft last year. You can't be relying on Andre Jones Jr. and KJ Henry to be the future at the defensive end position for this team. You got to keep one of these dudes. And Chase Young is the guy you invested the second overall pick in. Montez Sweat is 27 years old. Chase Young is 24 years old. There's a huge gap there. There's a lot more life in football left in Chase Young than it is Montez Sweat, at least you would think. And obviously the injury concerns around Young are something that people are looking at, and that's why I think there's been offers on Montez Sweat and not Chase Young. But I think teams also realize that Washington's going to be less likely to move Chase Young and more likely to listen to offers on Montez Sweat. And that's why you've seen teams move on Sweat. But I think there's also this league-wide consensus that Sweat's the better defender anyway, because he's been the most consistent. And he's the guy that's ready to help you win right now. So, with that said, I think shit can change. And you can see one or two guys traded. Nothing could happen. But there's the possibility that something could happen. And if we lose this game, I think something will happen. And if something does happen, I think it's pretty much all she wrote for Ronald Rivera. You're not a better team if you trade Montez Sweat or any of the players for that matter that's on the roster right now. You're not a better team. And if you're not a better team, it's going to be hard for you to win football games. Now, we've seen in the past, Sweat out, Young out, put in two different defensive ends, and the defense played better. But again, you're living in fantasy world if you think the defense is better off without either one of those guys on the field. So, anyway, I digress. This is a big game coming up on Sunday for Washington. I mean, every game is, as Ronald said at his press conference. Every game's a big game. He's not wrong, but at 3-4, your season's at a crossroads. And this is going to decide what direction I think the season goes in. You had so many opportunities to avoid this game meaning as much as it does. All you had to do was beat the Bears or the Giants, and you're not sitting here at 3-4. Instead, you're 4-3. If you beat both of them, you're 5-2. You could have avoided this. This game didn't have to mean what it means right now. But because this staff has been incapable of winning games that it's supposed to win, and, you know, it's funny because why are we supposed to beat the Bears or why are we supposed to beat the Giants? I can tell you the answer, and it's a very simple one. The Bears were winless when they came here. We were a 2-win team at the time, we were 2-2. The Bears were a 2-win team when they came here, or a winless team. We were a 2-win team. We were supposed to beat them. Period. End of discussion. The Giants were a 1-win team. We were a 3-win team last week when we met them. We should have beat them. Simple as that. I don't give a shit about family business, this, that. We should have beat them. Just like the Eagles are supposed to beat us. They don't want to hear about family business and they know us and this, that. Anything can happen on. They're supposed to beat us. And we were supposed to beat the Giants and we were supposed to beat the Bears. And this game wasn't supposed to mean our season, but it does. For all intents and purposes, obviously. The season's not done. You lose this game, you could go on to win 5 in a row, and you could be 8-5 heading into week 14's bye. Highly unlikely, however. Highly unlikely that takes place. So, anyway, let's move on to in other news, where we heard from Ronald Rivera on Friday, talk about what he had to say. But before we get to that, obviously, let's get to the final injury report for both teams in week number 8 heading into Sunday's contest. And so nothing surprising here. Everything that's here for me makes a ton of sense except for Curtis Samuel. I was expecting full on Friday and his status to be, hey, he's playing. The fact that we are still questionable has me a little worried about him. I'm not going to lie. But looking at this, Cody Barton out, Sadiq Charles out. We knew that. We talked about that. We knew that. Fadarian Mathis, questionable. They did the same thing with F.A. Obata when he came back against the Falcons back in week 6. So I expect Fadarian Mathis to be up and to be active on Sunday. And I think that means that Abdullah Anderson is the guy that they're going to yank down, is my guess. Benjamin St. Juste, or Curtis Samuel rather, questionable with a foot injury. I don't know the extent of it, but it makes me nervous anytime Curtis ends up on the injury report and he's not able to get a full day of practice in at any point during the week. So that's something to keep an eye on. I still think he's going to play. I told you guys Wednesday that I thought Cody Barton and Sadiq Charles were the only two guys that were going to miss this game. I thought everybody else would play, and I've been consistent with that messaging all week. I'm going to stick to that, but I got my eye on Curtis Samuel and his status for the game. But I think everybody's going to play. Benjamin St. Juste, Thigh. None of these guys are on the injury report. Benjamin St. Juste, Jonathan Allen, Sam Cosmi, Montez Sweat, Cole Turner, all practiced in full. All have been removed from the injury report. There's no designation there. They're all playing. Okay. On the Eagles side, remember they had added players after Thursday's practice. They came in on Wednesday with 3 guys. It was Bradley Roby, it was Reed Blankenship, and I think it was Milton Williams were the 3 guys that were on the injury report on Wednesday. By Thursday, they had added Jordan Davis, James Bradbury, and Zach Cunningham. So that was something to keep an eye on. And I told you, Jordan Davis, when we talk about a big man with a hamstring, that's always something to keep an eye on. And so I told you Bradley Roby wasn't going to play. You know, he had missed the first 2 practices of the week. I said, okay, he's not going to play. So he's out. That's not a surprise. Jordan Davis's hamstring is an interesting dynamic there. He was not a participant on Friday. And Friday's practice is usually like a glorified walkthrough. If you can't get in some sort of work on a Friday, that's always alarming for me. It's not the end-all be-all. He could still feel good on Sunday, and if they warm him up before the game and he feels good, they could trot him out there a bit. I mean, he plays on a deep defensive line at a position where they rotate guys in and out anyway. So even if he doesn't play, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it does hurt them from a run defense standpoint. He's huge in the middle of their defense. He's questionable, so that's one to keep an eye on. Everybody else is going to play in this game. As you can see, they don't even have designations. Reed Blankenship, we knew he was going to play with the ribs. He had been full all week. James Bradbury showed up on Thursday. It didn't sound too concerning to me with an ankle. Same with Zach Cunningham. I think they were just being a little precautious with those guys, but they're not on the injury report for Sunday. They're going to play. And same with Milton Williams. He's been limited all week. He got that full work in on Friday. He's a go as well. So nothing really too noteworthy here from the Eagles. I will bring this up, though. I will say, and I brought this up the last time, Hurts isn't 100%. Now, they're not using that as an excuse. As you can see, he's not even on the injury report. He's practiced all week. They're not even talking about it. But if you watched that Sunday night game, you saw him limping around. He did have on a knee brace in the second half to finish the game. He's not 100%, but his 80% or whatever he might be at, 90%, is still better than 95% of the quarterbacks in the NFL. So it's just something to note, but understand that they're not using it as an excuse. He's not even on the injury report. We got to still attack him as if he's 100%. And I wouldn't attack it any other way. So we heard from Ronald today, or yesterday, rather. And, this was one of the first times on a Friday, because normally he's pretty subdued on a Friday. This is one of the first times. And again, I told you, some of these press conferences are going to be cringeworthy as we get closer to him being fired. You know, the closer and closer your feet get to the fire, the more squeamish you get, and the more, antsy you are, and the more aggressive you become with some of the questions and things of that nature. A lot of trade deadline questions in this particular presser, and obviously he got to the point where he's like, hey, if y'all gonna ask me something about Philadelphia, I'll be glad to answer that, but we're gonna keep talking about the trade deadline. I mean, I can go ahead and go on about my business. So he redirected them to Philadelphia. He did talk about Jabril Cox. I saw a lot of people excited about Jabril Cox being activated. Ron did say that they're going to activate Jabril Cox, the linebacker that we got from Dallas's practice squad. I've been, it's funny how fan bases work, especially ours. I can't speak for everyone else's fan base, but I assume that a lot of them are like this, where you latch on to this mythical figure that you elevate into this ridiculous status that you've really never seen before, right? Somehow Khaleke Hudson became, Fred Warner overnight, and I get it. You just want to see him on the field, but he's still Khaleke Hudson. I like him a lot, and I want him to play, and I've been advocating for Khaleke Hudson for 2.5 years to just put a package in for him. You don't have to start him. You don't have to play him a ton. This should be a Khaleke Hudson package that you should be able to get out onto the field every week. There's no excuse to not get him on the field. But they haven't done that. But that's, again, we lack creativity. So that makes a ton of sense. But Khaleke Hudson isn't Fred Warner, okay? He's not Quay Walker. He's not one of these, game-changing, difference-making linebackers, but we've elevated him to that status for some of you. And another guy that is somehow turned into this unstoppable force that is just this athletic freak that has to be put on the field is Jabril Cox. And I'm like, he couldn't even get on the field in Dallas. Now, that doesn't mean he can't get on the field here. Dallas has much more defensive talent in their front seven than we do, especially at the linebacker position. So I understand, but with the way our linebacker position looks, there's no reason for guys with athleticism to be sitting on the sideline. So I get why fans wanted to see Jabril Cox. But he had to come in, he had to learn the defense, he had to get acclimated, and then there had to be opportunities for him, and now there is. So he's being elevated, and a lot of fans are excited, but I'm like, temper your expectations. I don't really know what you are expecting on Sunday. I look at him as a guy that they may have a role for him in certain situations where he may be spying Jalen Hurts. I still think that they're going to leave that to, say, a Khaleke Hudson. Like, they're not going to ask Jabril Cox to come in and right away hit the field as a defender and be tasked with something as great as spying Jalen Hurts. I don't think they're going to do that. But what I do think they're going to ask him to do is come up here and take the spot of a guy that I told you was in trouble last week, because I advocated for him after the Falcons game. I said, hey, Castro Fields needs another opportunity. He made some big plays. He was a huge block on the return by Jamison Crowder on the punt return. He made 2 special teams tackles. He was all over the field. He needs more opportunities. I said he should be up again. And then he got up. I advocated for it. They listened. He was up again in week 7, even though we had a healthy SIP, Christian Holmes. He still was up and active, and Christian Holmes was down. And I said, good, let's see what he can do again. And then he had 2 penalties last week against the Giants. And I said, well, you just effed up your opportunity, young man. You're going to be back to the practice squad now. And he is. He's not being elevated this week. Jabril Cox is being elevated. And I think Cox is being elevated because you've got an injury at the linebacker position, as we already know with Cody Barton. So you need another linebacker up anyway. And Castro Fields made it easy on him because he didn't play well on special teams last week. He hurt the team last week on special teams. So now Cox is going to get an opportunity to play special teams in that void that's being left by, and he may not be a gunner like Castro Fields is, but he'll have a role on special teams, and he'll fill that void. And I think you probably see a guy like Christian Holmes probably back up. He might be out there at gunner, but I think you're going to see Jabril Cox on special teams. You may see him in a spy situation. That is it. That is it on Jalen Hurts. But outside of that, and I don't think you're going to see that. Jack Del Rio has already told you everything you needed to know. Dave, as they call him, not David, Dave gave us some pretty good snaps, and he's the guy that's going to see an uptick in the amount of snaps played. David Mayo is going to be out there. And when they go to one linebacker, it'll be Jamin Davis. So if they are in 3 linebackers, then Khaleke comes on the field. I don't really see where Jabril Cox works into this equation. Just so we're clear, don't look for Jabril Cox. Look for him on special teams. He'll be there. But on defense, hate to burst your bubble, but I really don't hate to burst it. He's not going to be on the field unless he's spying Jalen Hurts, more likely than not. If we couldn't get Khaleke Hudson on the field all these years, what makes you think that Jabril Cox is just going to show up and get on the field a ton? Make it make sense. All right, we'll see. I could be wrong, and Ron, ranted and raved about how he loves his athleticism and this kid is this and that. Okay, we'll see. We'll see. I also wanted to bring up, Ron talked about the offensive line. We know changes are being made. I think, personally, they're going to go with Ricky Stromberg. But there's still an outside chance that it's Chris Paul. What I do know is that Chris Paul will be active this week. We do know that. That is a certainty. And I don't think he's been active all season long. He hasn't had to be. But he'll be up and active. I don't think he'll be starting, though. I think it'll be Ricky Stromberg who starts this game alongside, obviously, Tyler Larson. And they're going to look to fortify this offensive line in front of Sam. And I honestly think it took too long for them to make some of these moves and changes. But you want to give guys an opportunity to sink or float. and some guys really showed their ass last week. Obviously, Sadiq's injury prompts them to do something at guard. I don't think they would have done, and I don't blame them. Sadiq hasn't been terrible, but you had to do, after that performance by Nick Gates, you got to do something. That shit was the single worst performance of an offensive lineman. We've seen Wiley throw up all over himself this year multiple times. That was worse than anything Wiley has put on tape. He was the single most destructive force in the game on Sunday against the Giants. Of the 6 sacks, you could probably trace 3 or 4 of them directly to Nick Gates last week. He was not good. And that's an understatement. So something had to be done. I'm glad they were able to see that and immediately make a change. So anyway, I digress. Let's get into the game plan and talk about what needs to be done in order for Washington to get a victory. And for all intents and purposes, and I've said that phrase at least 3 or 4 times today, because for all intents and purposes, that one was intentional. This season is on the line. The season is on the line. At 3-5, you're done. And not actually done, not theoretically done, but figuratively, you're done. Who are we kidding? Shit's going to change. The morale of the team will be in the toilets. You're not going to win. If you can't beat Philadelphia this week, and that's a big, tall task in order. I don't know if there's a streak coming this year, guys. Like, Ron's job is on the line. This isn't like the past years where Ron knew, I'm back next year. I'm good. There's a different sense of urgency. And I think you start to see players tuning Ron out, knowing that he won't be here. Things change. It's human nature. Shit changes real fast when those players don't see you as the answer and they no longer see you as the guy that's going to take them where they ultimately want to go. Now you're just a placeholder. Well, why the hell treat that? Now they're going to start treating you like a substitute teacher. Well, I got to listen to you. You ain't going to be here in 2 weeks when my teacher comes back. You're not going to be here on Thursday when my teacher comes back. Man, get that out of my face. It could turn that way really quick, and this season could go south fast. You win on Sunday, and all of that gets put to rest because all you got to do is get past the trade deadline. Now the trade deadline questions don't exist anymore. Now you don't have to worry about answering that next week heading into the game against New England. You lose this game, and the first thing anybody's going to ask on Monday when Ron meets with the press is, hey, what y'all doing at the trade deadline? To hell with the game on Sunday. Y'all lost that shit already. You 3-5. What y'all doing at this trade deadline? Y'all gonna move somebody? And he's gonna be pissed off because he knows what it's gonna be. So, anyway, game plan. What's it gonna take for Washington to get the win? I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I woke up feeling dangerous today, but the game's not today. The game's tomorrow. So I don't know if that feeling carries over tomorrow, and I wake up feeling the same way. But today, Saturday, I woke up feeling dangerous. Like, hey, let's go beat these bastards. They ain't looking at us, they're looking past us. They talking about Dallas already. Trust me, they're not worried about us. Let's go beat these bastards. I woke up feeling dangerous, but the game's not today, it's tomorrow. We'll see how I feel tomorrow. On offense, first key to the game for Washington, and I hate even saying this shit. I don't even want to hear anybody else say this shit, let alone me saying it out of my damn mouth, but it has to be said. We got to start fast. I know. I don't want to hear that shit. But who are we kidding? In the losses, just look at all the losses this year and look at what they have in common. And look at all the games that we either won or had a chance to win and look at what they all had in common. And it's startling how identical those games are. How drastically different they are when you win or have a chance to win versus when you lose and get your ass whooped, or you lose a game you have no business losing. They all look the same. The wins, we came out and we started fast on offense. Even the Arizona game, we moved the football on the first 2 drives against Arizona. We only had the 7 points to show for it, but we moved the football. Then it kind of bogged down, but we started fast. We took the lead. It was either 7-3 or 7-0 in that game against Arizona. You know, the Denver game, We only had 3 points to show for it, and the Broncos were scoring, boat racing us and scoring on every drive, but the offense was moving the ball. Who didn't feel confident we couldn't move the ball on Denver in that game? I know for one, I knew we could move the football on Denver. And I remember tweeting it out saying, hey, if we could just protect Sam, they can't stop us on offense. And that proved to be the case. When we were moving the ball, you had the missed field goal with the bad snap on the first possession, and you went back down on the second possession and you got a field goal. We were moving the football. And then ultimately it all came together and we ended up scoring 35 points. That Buffalo game, we were moving the football. I know it got out of hand late. And it was 16-0 for the longest time. But we moved the football. How many times were we in Buffalo territory in that game? At least 5 or 6. We just couldn't do shit once we got there. It all fell apart for us. Sacks, penalties, interceptions, failed fourth down conversions. You name it, we did it. But it eventually got out of hand. But we moved the ball. Same thing with the Philadelphia game. We started fast. We scored touchdowns on our first 2 possessions. We had 17 points at halftime. We were moving the football. Didn't work out because the defense gave up big plays and the defense wasn't able to prevent the Eagles from getting into those short yardage situations where the tush push became a factor. But we had every opportunity to win that game. Falcons game, we started fast. I mean, again, we scored, 21 points? 17 points in the first half of that game, if I'm not mistaken, against Atlanta? We moved the football with ease. We got some help from the defense and the special teams set us up with short, but we were moving the football. But you look at all the losses, they all look the same. Outside of the Buffalo one, they all look the same. Outside of the ones I just mentioned, the Bears loss, start slow, get nothing going, get dominated in the first half. Giants game, start slow, get nothing going, get dominated, and you're fighting an uphill battle that you can't win, that you don't win. I mean, most of them look like that when you start slow. We got to start fast, just like we did in the first game. And it sounds cliche. It's easy to say. They just got to go. That first 15 has to hit. We don't convert that first third down of the game, we're in trouble. Usually it goes downhill for us fast after that. You convert that first third down, we get into an offensive rhythm. Okay, today's one of those days. All right, I see what we on. It's really simple. Next key for Washington's offense, protect Sam Howell. I mean, that goes without saying. And what I mean by protect Sam Howell, you got a brand new offensive line in here. Let's see what they're able to do, right? When the Eagles just rush forward, because this is not the Giants defense. They're not going to be blitzing 6 and 7 guys consistently. They may bring 6 guys once or twice or 3 or 4 times in the game, but it's not going to be 15 blitzes, 16 blitzes, 17 blitzes in the game, right? They're not the Giants. That's not their MO. It's not what they do. That's not to say that they're not going to test us, because they saw what the Giants, this is a copycat league. They saw what the Giants did. So they may be a little bit more aggressive than they were the first time, and see if we can handle it. But it's not just on the offensive line. It's not just on Sam, holding the ball, and he's got to continue his growth and maturation and getting rid of the football. Thought he did a better job last week of finding incompletions. He's got to do that again this week. Last week it was almost disastrous when he tried to find incompletion. He almost found a Giant defender for a walk-in pick 6. He's going to have to be smart. But it's also short passing game, screen game. Hey, how about we actually run the ball with intention and purpose this week? How about we do that? How about we don't just run the football to say, hey, ran it 15 times this week. Now let me get to my 42 passing attempts. See, I ran it. No, how about we actually run the football with purpose and intent? Not just these standard inside, trap or inside power gun runs and hope somebody catches a block and you're able to get 4 yards. Let's actually put some meaning and some creativity, some thought into the run game. Let's actually get under center and mix that in too. it's everybody's job to protect Sam. Not just Sam's job, not just the offensive line. Tight ends are included, running backs also, offensive coordinator, receivers running the routes. Everybody's involved here. Play calling is paramount. Everybody's involved. We got to protect Sam. That's how we're going to have a shot offensively. Next key to the game offensively for Washington, get your best players the ball. I've been screaming this shit since week one. I was not happy with the ball distribution in week one against Arizona, but I said it was week one. Not going to trip. Then we got to week two, and it still seemed a bit off, especially when you're talking about Jahan, but Terry was way more involved, and so I was shut up. We're 2-0. Shut up. Then you lose to Buffalo, and Jahan's still not involved, and really Terry wasn't involved either, and now I'm pissed off. Because this has been a theme all season long. Then we get to week 4, and finally, guys are involved. Jahan had the drop, but he also had the touchdown grab to send it to overtime. Should have been to go for 2 to win. But everybody was involved. Everybody was involved. Curtis was involved. Terry was involved. Jahan was involved, in that game against the Eagles the first time. That was, to me, the best game in terms of ball distribution. That's how it's supposed to look, that Eagles game. Then, we could continue going on with this. It was bad again against the Bears. In the Falcons game, Jahan had 1 target. He dropped it, but it still doesn't change the fact that he only had 1 target. And last week, it took us essentially a whole half of football to realize Terry McLaurin was even on the field. Remember, we questioned was Terry even on the field against the Bears because we saw so much of Crowder and Pringle on the field at the same time, and he wasn't getting ball. I can't state this enough. You want to win, get your best players involved. It's not rocket science. I talk about this all the time. I watch games every week where coordinators find it very easy to get their best players involved. You want to score points, you want to win games in this league, it's not rocket science. Get your best guys to football. For me, in this game, bare minimum, 6 touches for Terry. Not targets, touches. Terry needs to touch it 6 times in this game. I don't give a shit in what capacity. He needs to touch it at least 6 times. So that probably means he needs at least 9 or 10 targets. Because the likelihood is he won't touch it in the run game at all. Jahan needs at least 5 touches. At least 5 touches. Don't give a shit. It could be 4 screens and 1 slant. I don't give a shit. He just needs to touch it 5 times. And Curtis needs to touch it at least 4 times. I was leaning towards 5 because he's a guy that can touch it in the run game. But Curtis needs to touch it at least 4 times. I'm leaning towards 5. These are your best players. Logan Thomas shouldn't lead this team in targets in this game. Leave that distinction for somebody that can actually do shit with the football once they get it in their hands. It's cool to hit Logan on a 3rd and 3 for 5 yards on a stop route right over the ball. It's cool to hit Logan on a 1st and 10 for 4 yards to get the drive started. But I'm not looking for Logan 30 yards down the field. I'm not looking for Logan on 3rd and 9 on an out route. Leave that to the boys on the outside. Leave that to the receivers. Get your best players of football. I don't know why I got to beg and why I got to twist your arm to get you to get your best players the ball. That shit doesn't make sense to me. Final offensive key to the game, 3rd down, red zone, and playing the Eagles. What do I mean by playing the Eagles? We'll get to that in a second. I don't have to explain to you what I mean by 3rd down. You got to be efficient on 3rd down and in the red zone. The game usually comes down to who can be most efficient on 3rd downs in the red zone where it counts the most. And we got to play the Eagles, not ourselves. So that means we can't have stupid penalties. We had so many dumb penalties last week against the Giants. Every drive was behind the sticks either because of a sack or a stupid penalty. We would get a 5-yard gain on 1st down, and we give it right back with a false start on 2nd down. Now we're back to 2nd and 10. Like, you can't do that kind of dumb shit and expect to beat anybody, especially a team that's better than you in the Philadelphia Eagles. We couldn't even beat the Giants doing stupid shit. What makes you think we're going to be able to do that playing a team like the Philadelphia Eagles? We got to play a clean game for the most part. We can't have turnovers, so you can't beat yourself with sacks and penalties that keep you behind the sticks. You got to convert on third downs. The best way to convert on third downs is to stay out of trouble on first and second down. We got to be efficient on first and second downs to get us to third and manageable. Then we got to convert when we get to that 3rd and 5, 4, 3. Even 6 is one that we got to pick up in this game consistently. And then when we get in the red zone, when we put together that 10-play drive and we get to the Eagles, 9-yard line and it's 3rd and 3, we got to convert. Or we get to the Eagles 16-yard line and it's 3rd and 9 and we get them to 4th and 2, we got to go for it. If we're in a position in the game's in a situation early on in the game, on the first drive, I don't know if you guys remember this, first possession of the game against the Eagles, first time we played them this season, we went for it on the 4th down. I know that sounds crazy because we don't go for it on 4th downs, it feels like. But we went for it on that drive, and we got it. And that's how we ended up scoring a touchdown. And the Eagles did some stupid shit, penalties and stuff that kept the drive alive. Not my problem. That's why we have to play the Eagles. We can't play ourselves, and we can't allow the officials to give the Eagles an opportunity to win this game. Don't put yourself in those positions where the officials can make calls that can alter the outcome of this game. Play the Eagles, not ourselves, and not the officials. Take care of the football. Stay away from stupid penalties. Like the subjective penalties, once the play happens, that happens every week. You deal with the calls when they come, right? How they come, when they come, you just deal with them. The pre-snap shit is the stuff that's avoidable. The false starts, the illegal shifts, not having 2 guys set and sending guys in motion. That kind of stuff, we can't have it. The holding penalties and the illegal contacts and illegal man downfield on the screen, that kind of shit happens. You don't want it to, but it does. The pre-snap penalties, the false starts, not getting guys set up right, somebody's, not lined up properly, 2 guys going in motion and don't set. That shit right there, legal formation, illegal shift, that's the shit that can't happen. You're asking for a loss. Be efficient in the red zone. Be efficient on third downs. And don't play the officials and don't play yourself. Play the Eagles. Washington's defense. First key to the game is the same key that was first last time. You got to limit DeAndre Swift. We shut him down for the most part last game. He's dynamic. I don't want to take any pressure off of Jalen Hurts. Every time I play the Eagles, the message is always going to be the same. Make Jalen Hurts beat us. And if he does, I can live with that. Especially with the way he's turning the ball over this year. I want the ball in his hands, and I want to see what he's going to do with it. I don't want DeAndre Swift having a massive role in this game, running all over the place and taking pressure off of this Eagles offense to have to be able to be efficient in the pass game. There's so many factors that go into the pass game. We talk about it all the time because we've got this ridiculously high sack total, and now you are able to recognize how much goes into a play in which your quarterback is dropping back to throw. Offensive line has to do their job. Receivers have to run the proper routes in proper depth. The running backs and the tight ends have to be at their best, finding out who they have to block, getting a piece. If they got a chip on the way out, there's so many moving parts. So many things can go wrong. All that has to go wrong is one thing. Everything can go right. Perfect protection. Running back does his job. Tight end gets a great chip on the way out. Receivers run great routes. They're open, and the ball gets tipped. Or the quarterback is slightly inaccurate, and it's picked off. So many things have to go right. But none of those things have to happen on a run play. All the quarterback has to do is get a clean center quarterback exchange, hand it to the running back, and the offensive line just has to do their job. And then everything else is on the running back. It's much easier when you can just hand it off. There's a greater margin for error when you hand off the football. DeAndre Swift is such a special player. He can impact the game so much more than he did in the first game, and we got to make sure that it doesn't happen. Limit DeAndre Swift's productivity in this game like you did in the first one. Second key to the game defensively for Washington, contain, hit, disrupt, and turn over Jalen Hurts. I already told you I don't think he's 100%. That's not an excuse. And if we beat them, I don't want to hear Eagles fans talking about it as an excuse. But the fact of the matter is he's not 100%. But again, I don't think he's really hurting because if he was, he wouldn't have practiced all week and they would have had to report that to the NFL, and they didn't report shit because he wasn't on the injury report at all this week. So he's fine as far as I'm concerned. So now we get past that. Every time we play Jalen Hurts, for the most part, we do a good job of containing him as a runner. I don't really worry about him in that aspect against us. We do a really good job. Of all the quarterbacks that we see that are mobile, he's the guy that usually hurts us the least amount. So I feel good about containing him, keeping those rush lanes intact, right? Hitting him has been problematic for us. Even when we get to him, he seems to find a way to weasel his way out of it, or he's able to get outside the pocket and throw the football away. I want to hit his ass in this game, like the Jets did. I want to fluster him and disrupt him like the Jets did. That's when you get turnovers on Jalen Hurts. When he's comfortable, when he's able to stand back there clean and tall, he is dangerous. He's gotten so much better from the pocket. I don't have to explain that to you. But if you want him to play like he did against the Jets, you want him to play like he did at times against the Dolphins, missing throws, throwing a pick six, you got to get to him. You got to disrupt him. He fumbled last week against the Dolphins too. You want him to fumble? You got to hit him. We can force turnovers. If we're going to beat the Eagles, we got to force at least one turnover. We forced none in the game the first time. And that's why we lost. That and the fact that we gave up big plays. Speaking of which, next key to the game defensively, no big explosives. None. I'm not leaving us any room for error. None. And I know they're going to give up one or two. But I'm not going to say limit because then we'll give up 5 or 6. No big explosives. None. That's what killed us in the first game. The big catch by Devontae Smith right before the half that set up the field goal. The 2 A.J. Brown bomb touchdowns. The big catch and runs. Those hurt us in the first game. Without them, the Eagles don't beat us. We were really good against them on third downs, getting them off the field. We just gave up too many big plays. We gave up a big punt return in that game as well. We got to clean some shit up. No big explosive. That goes for special teams as well. And then finally, Washington's defense needs to win the turnover battle and end of half battles. So win the turnover and end of half battles. And obviously winning the turnover battle is self-explanatory. I don't need to get into that. But what I've realized in the last 3 contests against Philadelphia dating back to last year, the one this year and the 2 last year, is the team that won the end of halves pretty much won the game. You think about the first game last year back at FedEx, we lost 24-8. The second quarter was disastrous for us. They didn't score a single point in any other quarter but the second quarter. They scored all 24 of their points in the second quarter, including the end of the first half. If you recall, I thought that was the nail in the coffin. That's what deflated us the most. It was 16-0, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was 16-0. And the Eagles had the big play to Devontae Smith where it should have been picked off. We got 2 defenders down there. Bobby McCain runs by the whole play. I don't know what the hell he was doing, but he runs behind the play. Kendall Fuller, thinking he's got help, kind of tries to undercut it. The ball goes over his hands, and Devontae Smith somehow comes down with it. And then we get him to 4th down. They throw a fade to Devontae Smith. He catches it, and then they go for 2, and they get that as well. And that happened all with like 16 seconds left in the first half. They had the ball back with like a minute and 30-something seconds, but we held them, and then gave up a big play, and then they kind of just hurried up the rest of the drive, didn't use any of their timeouts really, and scored. The second game in that season, if you remember, we scored the field goal before halftime. Played a hell of a first half, really punched them in the mouth, came out, showed we weren't afraid and that we were here to play. And then we capped it off with that big De'Ami Brown catch. We called a timeout, and we get Joey Slye on the field, and he banged it home from like 56 yards. And we left that field at halftime, going into the halftime break feeling like, oh, hell yeah, let's go beat these bastards. That was so momentous. And then you saw what we did at the end of that game as well, with Taylor Heineke, forcing the issue, getting the roughing the the quarterback, the unnecessary, roughness on the quarterback, and we won the game. We won both of the end of half situations. You look at the last game. The Eagles got that big play. We were up 17-7. They get that big play to Devontae Smith where we still don't know how the hell he managed to catch that football. And that got them in the field goal range. They got the field goal and they got the momentum. They dominated the third quarter. They took that momentum, and John Dotson's drop also helped. But they took that momentum from that play before the half and the field goal, and they polyed that into a dominant third quarter in which they flipped the script, took the lead, and they were out in front. And we had to play catch up. And then we gave up the touchdown at the end of that game, if you recall, to A.J. Brown. We couldn't get the defensive stops that we needed. They didn't even have to do that. They were too aggressive. They should have just kicked a walk-off field goal. They dominated that final drive of the end of the game, and they should have won walking off with a field goal. Instead, they went for the jugular vein and gave us back the football, and we made them pay for it. And we should have been going for the touchdown to win. And that's what it came down to. They were over-aggressive. We weren't aggressive enough. The end of the halves have been huge in these games the last 3 times. Before halftime, that final 2-minute situation, whether we're on offense or defense, we've got to win. We've got to win. And if we're close and this game comes down to the final 2 minutes, we got to win. So that leads me to my final outcome. And I don't think we're going to beat the Eagles. I don't have a good feeling about this game in terms of the focus of the team. I think they're scatterbrained. I think they're all over the place. I think we don't handle adversity well. You guys know that. And so now you add in another, piece of adversity with the trade deadline and, is Ronald going to be here? What the staff's going to, there's just a lot swirling around this team. And generally, we don't handle those types of situations well. So I look at this game, and I do think we're going to be in this game. I do expect it to be close because I do think the Eagles are overlooking us. I do think that's taking place. I do think they look ahead on the schedule. They see Dallas next week at home, and they see that as a massive game, and they just expect to beat us. So I do think we're going to have a shot. And I do think Joey Sly's going to miss a kick, and it's going to alter the way that we approach the game at the end. Because instead of us just needing a field goal to beat them 29-27, he missed earlier in the game, puts us in a situation where we need a touchdown late in the game, but we don't have any timeouts and we run out of time, essentially. That's what I think ultimately happens, is that Philadelphia is going to be up 24-23 late in the fourth quarter. They're going to put together a patented Eagles drive, burn a ton of clock, kick a field goal, go up 4 at 27-23. And then we're going to be bitching and complaining about that Joey Sly miss, in the third quarter that hurt us. And now we need a touchdown, and we only got 41 seconds and no timeouts, and you need a touchdown. And we just don't have enough time. And we lose the game 27-23. Valiant effort again, but nobody cares about how close you came. You didn't get it done. And the Eagles sweep us, and we got to live with that for the next 365. So that's what I see happening. What says you? Leave it down in the comment section. What do you think is going to happen in this game? Scoring more if you feel like giving that. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow. Win, lose, or draw. You know where to find me, your man Louie T. After the game is done, Mob, you know what it is. We'll be together watching this thing unfold for good, bad, worse, or etc. Or all of the above. We usually go through the full gamut of emotions during the span of that 3 hours watching the game together. But anyway, you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. You know what it is. I'll see you guys after the game. And of course, as always, let's roll these boys.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hold. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. The 35, the 30, the 20. He's gone.